Pat Salver with Health Innovation Media, broadcasting live from Health 2.0, the 7th annual Health 2.0, being held for the first time in the Silicon Valley in the Santa Clara Convention Center, because I think they've outgrown all the venues in San Francisco. And it's my pleasure today to have with me Kathy Kastner.
Hello, Pat.
And hello, Kathy. And before we get started, I just have to say, what on earth is on your shirt?
My Death Kills shirt? Well, I've discovered a statistic that's pretty much irrefutable.
And
We're all going to
is,
die.
We're all going to die.
And the Death Kills t-shirt actually came from a panel that I was on in Toronto, which is where I'm from. It was a fringe theater panel that talked about the impact of theater on life and death.
Yeah.
And
you mean a really bad play can kill you?
Yes, something like that.
Something like that.
I've almost experienced that. I'm sure you have too. Sorry. So I made up these shirts for the crew of the Fringe panel, but it led into my website, which is called BestEndings.com, which is on the back. It's on my best ending, right?
So I'm assuming that Best Endings has something to do with death, that death kills, and that's what we're going to talk about here today.
Exactly. That is exactly right. In fact, it has less to do with death, since we all know that's going to happen, and more to do with dying. Because unlike Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who constantly talks about death and dying, it's the other way around. After you're dead, there is no more dying. So I
don't know why I'm laughing, because this is really not a funny topic.
Well, in fact, I appreciate you laughing, because it's a terribly tricky topic, a hugely emotional and multi-layered topic that in fact, I probably couldn't have picked a trickier topic to talk about and develop a website about. But I was lurking on a tweet chat for hospice and palliative medicine, hearing these wonderful healthcare professionals saying, if only we talked about it more, so much grief could be avoided at the end of life. And I put forward, I'm all for talking, but I don't know what to talk about.
That's very interesting. So your way of getting into this is not because you're actually dying right now, but because you saw a problem and you wanted to be a part of the solution. And I think it's really interesting that you talk about how many people are talking. There are so many websites now, ranging from the Conversation Project to My Directive to a new company that's here at Health 2.0, Vimti, to what you're doing with Best Endings, that are all trying to address this issue. How do you put this all together, Kathy? How are you going to make sense? How are we going to make sense out of this?
It's an incremental process. It's such an awful topic to contemplate that I believe many of the websites that have sprung up since I started have complementary competencies. There's a Conversation Project, there's 5 Wishes, there's Engage with Grace, and each of them helps us, in my opinion, wrap our heads around the fact that really our loved ones are dying. I'm in great health. I'm not, in fact, doing this because anyone in my family is in danger of dying. But
wait, we're all going to die, so everybody's
how foolish
right.
of me. 100%, really. So yes, it's aimed at everybody. Although my market is adult children caring for aging parents.
Ah, okay.
Because where there are DNRs and encouragement to fill out an advance directive specifically for a DNR, a do not resuscitate, there's many a slip, as Shakespeare would say, twixt cup and lip when it comes to our failing bodies and the end, which may or may not require a DNR. So there are crisis points in any adult child's life taking care of their aging parent, where they may have to determine if they want their parent to have a feeding tube. Feeding is such a big, huge thing as life winds down, because it's tied up with love and nurturing and caring and the social aspects of it, that to understand that as life winds down, we need less and less food and drink.
And the other thing, that is really fascinating what you just said, because as a physician, my take on feeding tubes is that they are the complete opposite of me bringing you a luscious, turkey dinner. this is, an invasive procedure. It's having a tube somewhere in your body, whether it's in your nose, which is bad, or whether you've had to have a surgical procedure and have it implanted.
Yeah.
And yet there is this incredible emotion around, I can't let grandma not have food. I can't let her starve
to death.
So how are you addressing that?
What I do with BestEndings is bring resources from the world over. So I have narratives from doctors who have palliative care doctors who have seen the devastation of not just had the conversations, but understanding the context and the right questions to ask. So there's a doctor in Toronto who's the head of Baycrest, which is a world-renowned brain center. And he said to me, Kathy is a kind of a hail fellow, well-met kind of guy. He said, Kathy, do you like peppermint ice cream? No, and I'm thinking, where is this going? What kind of ice cream do you like, Kathy? I say Jamocha almond fudge.
Ah, my favorite too.
What would it be like if you couldn't crunch the nuts? If you couldn't feel the ice cream sliding down your throat and feel all of that tactile stuff in your mouth? That's what to think about when you're talking about feeding tubes. Not the way it's described for the Guantanamo people, having a feeding tube shoved down your nose into your stomach, which I'm sure you know.
I actually did a few of them.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, not on me, on other people.
And to understand that getting nutrition is not what it's all about. Right? It's about the nurturing and the social aspects and the thing that you can bring care to someone by letting them have little bits of food instead of saying, I'm going to starve my mother to death. But we, regular folks, have no sense of that. And why should we? Why should we understand that dialysis is, anyone on dialysis is going to die eventually anyhow, but instead of pitching it like this is going to give you a longer life, understand that it takes such a toll on your body, the 4 or 5 hours a day, right? 4 or 5 times a week, with someone who's already vulnerable. The questions that I have learned to ask as a result of reaching out to the Hospice and Palliative Medicine group on Twitter, many of whom I haven't met, are ask not how successful or unsuccessful the treatment is. Ask not how invasive or uninvasive it is. Ask about the recovery and the complications of recovery, and if after the procedure, what kind of normal are you going to return to? Do we understand to ask those questions?
No, we don't. And even your ice cream analogy is really interesting. I don't think that I've ever heard anybody dissect it down to the point of saying, so what does it really mean to feed somebody, right? And I actually, as you were telling the story about the ice cream and got me thinking, I thought, okay, for me, having a nice glass of wine before dinner, sit around, have a conversation with my husband, there's a whole picture that I can paint around it. But if I'm at the end of my life and I have a feeding tube and you pour the Chardonnay down it, it's just not going to be the same.
Well, I've been thinking about tequila down the tube, but it's the same. It's the same thing. I'll get drunk, but will I enjoy the getting drunk part? So, there are 2 or 3 life-prolonging interventions that are common enough that what I've done is brought together healthcare professionals, that is narratives, or I interview healthcare professionals and then blog about it on my website, caregivers who've gone through this, not like the Conversation Project, which is wonderful, but my intention is to bring all the positive that I possibly can. So it's, my mother didn't want to have a feeding tube, as I was just speaking to one of the attendees here, but my sister couldn't handle that. My sister was adamant about, giving my mother supplemental feeding. I'm thinking, don't just share your advanced care plan, which I think is a really unintuitive word, or advanced directive.
Right.
Don't just share it with that substitute decision maker. Share it with everyone who may matter in your life, so that they have a chance to understand where you're coming from and why you do or don't want something, so that it's not a crisis situation right at the end of life.
So this also, this is really fascinating because years ago I read an article that a doctor had written about advanced directives and why they didn't work. It was an opinion piece. I think it was in JAMA.
Okay.
And he told a story. And the story was of a man and his wife and they both had their advance directives. They both agreed. They both were knowledgeable about them. But the daughter that didn't stay in touch, that lived, 3,000 miles away, when Dad gets sick, is incapacitated, is, not completely with the program, the daughter shows up and says, "No, Dad wouldn't have wanted that. He would have wanted everything done. Mom, sorry, I'm taking over." And this doc implied that he had this situation come up all the time. And so I think your point about I can tell my husband, but if I haven't told my kids, right, or who knows, maybe my cousin or somebody else that feels like they have to have a role in my end of life decision, then I'm going to be thwarted. So I want to ask you, talk about a lot of different websites. I recently had a chance to talk to Scott Brown from My Directives, and one of the things that he has put into that site, I say he, the company has put into that site, is an ability to make videos.
Yeah.
And so I could imagine if my son, for example, even thought that he was going to go against my advance directives, if I played the video and said, "Jason, read my lips, no feeding tube," it would have an impact.
Absolutely.
And it would be different than reading a piece of paper.
Absolutely. And the thing about pieces of paper, in fact, any of these advanced care plan things, is where are they?
That's right. Where
Where
are
are they? My website also has an app which will live on a cell phone. Now, I don't know, the world is evolving even as we speak, right, technology-wise, but the thought is...
You may one day want to have it tattooed on you.
I've seen episodes of House where someone has had a DNR tattooed, and I've learned that paramedics are mandated to do those shocks. It doesn't matter if you've got a DNR tattooed on your chest. The other thing I put forward to the HPMers is I've only seen CPR on TV.
Oh,
and they
okay.
gave me studies, great literature studies.
Uh-huh. And the HPMers are?
Hospice and palliative medicine.
Okay.
Those wonderful people who are all about comfort. All about comfort. Now, I don't know about you. You're a doctor, so you probably know more about this than I do, but my impression of palliative care was yuckiness. You're in a gray place, you're going to be left there to die, there's nothing else that can be done. And I have found I'm not alone in that perception.
Well,
right?
Until recently, I thought hospice meant you went somewhere.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
And I'm a physician.
Well,
so.
I'm learning it's not just us real people that have not had the opportunity to understand the implications and the complications of not even life-prolonging devices, but things like implantable cardiac defibrillators. Through social media, met Hugo Campos, who's got an ICD, and I then learned that at the end of life, those ICDs give nasty shocks.
So there you go.
They're designed to keep the heart
Right.
going. But at the end of life, when you want to let go, perhaps you've been given permission to let go. And then this ICD is forcing that heart to stay alive.
Well, you have to include it. Please, in my directive, please remember to turn off the automatic implantable defibrillator. Not something that most people would think about.
No, absolutely not. And there are many things like that, many small but large things like that. So what I have learned is that a DNR is just the beginning at the end. That in between, whether it's Alzheimer's, which is its own piece of horribleness, or chronic kidney disease, or COPD, or heart failure, that you end up going to the hospital for things like urinary tract infections. You have the option, should you know enough about it, to say, do not give this compromised system antibiotics. Just make sure they're comfy. Mm-hmm. The notion of dying as a result of becoming, as one doctor said, you'll become toxic and you'll die. And I'm thinking, but what does that mean?
Well, that's a translation of, in the old days they used to say that the pneumonia is the old man's best friend, right?
Absolutely.
But what happened, at least through my generation of training, I mean, we were, basically taught that you keep the person alive, particularly if you're covering and you weren't my primary patient, you were someone else's patient signed out to me. I'm going to keep you alive until the next day. I mean, where's the humanity of that?
Absolutely.
I got really good at doing it, but it wasn't very humane.
Well, I think you doctors are in a tough position. I really do. My understanding is that your role is to save, to cure, to make things better.
Right.
And my understanding is many doctors feel a failure. I'm sure you've heard this too. If their patient says, I don't want that. I don't. But what about, couldn't you just, I don't want it. And the doctor walks out. It's insane to me, but that doctors are made to feel like they have not done enough if they don't do everything. It's not just families. It's not just that that daughter flying in from wherever and saying, I want everything done. So it's just been, it continues to be a fascinating journey to see how the shift has gone so far to keeping the organs alive while the rest of the body is disintegrating. And also that we dwindle. You know, you don't have to die of a disease. You don't have to die of cancer or heart disease. But as you dwindle and become smaller,
we call it frail elderly.
Yeah, the frail elderly.
Which is kind of a nice way of saying you dwindle.
Yeah, and to be comfortable as you dwindle rather than saying, like my father-in-law is 93 years old and has his wits about him enough that he regularly says to me in his lovely Scottish accent, Kathy, I need a woman. And, you know, he's in a retirement home, he's surrounded by women, and I say, you know, what about all these women? He says, oh, they've got too many problems.
Well, on that note, I can't believe how quick this time flew by. But I thought I would end by quoting my father-in-law as well.
Okay.
Who died in his 90s, 94, of a completely curable mouth cancer that he refused to get treated. And what he used to say to me is, Pat, don't let them tell you it's the golden age. In fact, it's the rust age.
So much wisdom.
Yes, so much wisdom. So on that, I want to thank you very
Thank you
much,
so
Kathy,
much.
not only for being with us here today, but for all the work you do. Keep on doing it. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much. And I've done a TED Talk on the topic, and the audience was laughing. So that's the tone of Best Endings.
Okay,
Thank you so
I
much.
can really see it. It isn't often that we have somebody quote Shakespeare in the middle of one of these interviews, so I really appreciated that.